Hi, I'm Nathan Cruz and welcome back to Inside the Toy Room. So today we're not actually talking about toys, but we are talking about something that's inspired a lot of the toys in here and something that's a huge part of this toy room, and that's comic books. Now, whether you know it or not, you've definitely been influenced by comic books, whether it be a film you've watched, TV series you've followed, characters that you've gone on to enjoy. They've definitely been featured in comic books, or 9 times out of 10 derived from comic books. Grew up a huge Batman fan, as I've already mentioned, and as a kid I watched the cartoons, I watched the films, and then as I got a little older into my teen years, I wanted to check out a lot of the source material, and that would be the comic books. And a good starting point, and I think for anybody, would be this comic book right here, Killing Joke. Now, this has been reviewed over and over and over again. I think it's a really good starting point for anybody who's wanting to get into comic books, because as you can see, it's not exactly massive, it's just average sized comic book. It's not like some of the graphic novels. I actually own this in the collector's edition, which comes with this cool little Joker figure and Batman figure. That was the first introduction I had to comic books, and the first thing that really opened my eyes up was, oh my god, these are really dark, and some of these stories, you go into some of the Spider-Man stories, for example, some of the Hulk stories as well, and they're really dark. This one actually answered a lot of questions that I didn't. Like, for example, I knew that at some point there was no longer Batgirl and she'd become Oracle, but I didn't really know how. Then I read that comic book and found out that Joker shot her in the spine. Yeah, they're dark. That was like the starting point for me, so I started collecting some of the graphic novels from there. There was a series called Batman R.I.P. where they killed off Batman, or at least seemingly so. That was the first graphic novel that I got. It was quite thick and hefty. It was a good read and a good book. And as the years have gone on, I've collected so many different comic books, and I started diving into Marvel. And one of my favourite things in comic books is crossovers. Now, every geek and nerd, let's face it, these are kind of nerdy, sits there and dreams of what would happen if Hulk fought Superman, what would happen if Batman would step into the Marvel universe. So in the 90s they actually answered some of this, and in 1996 they launched something called the Amalgam, which was DC and Marvel came together to create a storyline where a portal would open. I believe it opens originally in the DC universe. I can't remember, it's been a while since I've read these. Everyone just starts crossing over, and they gave us, some amazing, it was like a 4-parter it was DC versus Marvel Comics, and some of them had to fight it out for survival, basically. It was really cool, or to save their individual universe. Having the Avengers, X-Men and the Justice League and all these characters meet together was amazing. And then in 1997 they did what kind of like a spin-off of these, which was these actual universes and what happened with these characters. So for example, you had like a love story with Robin and Jubilee. You had something called Dark Claw, which is Batman and Wolverine, like what would happen if Logan became Batman. You have Spider-Boy, which is Superboy getting Spider-Man's powers. Iron Lantern, I mean, I don't really need explaining, it's a green version of Iron Man, right? The JLX, which was the Justice League and the X-Men all combined. These are amazing. Like, I just thought these were so cool that they even created these. Now later on in the 90s they released this, and this has nothing to do with the Amalgam universe. This was just a one-off comic, Spider-Man and Batman. The artwork to begin with on this is awesome, like throughout the comic. Even the front cover, it's got this like 3D effect to it. This was first introduced to me by Matt Myers. He had this, he let me borrow it and I read it and I thought it was amazing. Basically, Batman and Spider-Man have to team up because Carnage and Joker team up, who are the two most evil villains from their respected universes. I love the respect that Spider-Man shows for Batman as though he's this legend. This is probably one of my favourite comics in my collection, just because out of all the crossover events, I think this is the one that's best written. Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. Now, it's no secret I'm a huge DC fan, I'm a huge Batman fan, I love the Justice League, I love Green Lantern, but I wanted to check out more of the Marvel stories. But my favourite Marvel hero is the Incredible Hulk, and this would be one of my favourite stories right here. It's a graphic novel, so it's pretty thick, this one, but I highly recommend it. World War Hulk. My mother-in-law got me this for Christmas. This is the premium edition. Great read, such a good read. It's a hardback cover, so I know that this is gonna last. Yeah, this is definitely one of my favourite comic books in this collection. We've got the entire Jeff Loeb Hulk collection here, which is this 2 books, and basically chronicles the battles between Hulk and Red Hulk. Really good reads. I spoke about these toys in the Spider-Man episode, so I had to get the comic book based off it, which is the Planet of the Symbiotes. Really good story. Kind of gives you a history of where they came from and stuff like that. I mean, amazing visuals in this, just flicking through. Look at that Carnage. That's awesome. One of my favourite villains in the Marvel Universe is Galactus, so I wanted to get the original story arc where he debuted, which is Fantastic Four 387. I've got the 5 comics that followed this and that story. These started in 1994. Awesome artwork on this, holographic, like, flame glow. That's awesome. Some of the other crossover events I like, I don't know if you know this, but actually Mighty Morphin Power Rangers have their own comic book series by Boom Comics. More recently they've done something called the Shattered Grid, which is where the character Lord Draken came from, which is Tommy Oliver gets the white powers and the green powers, and in this universe he's taken control and he's just this evil, almost like villainous Power Rangers, like a Black-Pink Ranger. It's cool. It's a really good read. One of the other things that they did is they did a cool crossover event, DC Comics with the Justice League and Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It's not the most gripping story, but it's cool to see so many famous characters here, and me personally, growing up loving Power Rangers, loving Batman, seeing them in one. Look at that! Batman and the Megazord. Just all you need. That sucked me in. I didn't have to read the blurb, I just bought it just based off of that. Now, because of my profession, I spend a lot of time on the road, and we have service stations in the UK which feature like a magazine shop called WH Smith's, and I'd spend a lot of time going into there to get an issue to read whilst I'm on a 8-hour journey that I'm sharing with somebody. And one of the ones more recently that they did was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Batman. This is so good. I can't sell this enough. I was so gripped to this. I get this first issue just because I was like, that looks cool. Then I read through it and was like, I cannot wait for the next issue. And it was like fortnightly or maybe even monthly that these would come out. I think it may have been monthly. So I remember I'd get this issue, read it, was gripped, couldn't wait for the next issue. And then the week before that I knew that was coming out, I'd bring the previous issue with me, read that in the car, get to the service station, pick up the next one. They made this into an animated film and it really doesn't live up to the comic book. I'd highly recommend getting those. I'm so happy that I've got these in my collection. Talking about recent comics, now back in the 90s there was a comic book called Maximum Carnage, and it did so well. It really dove into how dark Cletus Cassidy is. Basically goes on this huge killing spree with a gang of different Marvel villains, and there's all these Marvel superheroes that have to team up. Even Spider-Man and Venom team up to try and take Carnage down. Since then they did Minimum Carnage, where he shrinks himself down and jumps into the miniverse and basically tries to take over people from the inside out. I mean, he's dark. One of the more recent ones that they did just this year gone in 2019 was Absolute Carnage. Now, big shout out to my friends at A Place in Space, which is a comic book store in Croydon, but they also have an online store. They hooked me up with my subscriptions. These come out fortnightly. When I heard that this was announced, I just had to get it. I couldn't wait to read it. And again, such a great, gripping story. Essentially, Cletus Cassidy was killed and was brought back to life by this cult, and then he just wants to collect all the codexes of anybody who's ever carried a symbiote so that he can become the symbiote god. So you could have had a Scream or Venom, all these people that have ever had a symbiote attached to them. Peter Parker, of course, when he had the black Spider-Man suit. It follows on from the Red Goblin story. If you haven't read that, read that as well, because what would happen when Green Goblin gets the Carnage symbiote, well, you find out in them comics, and it's really interesting. One of the more recent Batman comics that got everybody talking was White Knight, and yeah, I got that novel gifted to me by Simon Graves. Big thank you for that one. Loved it. I couldn't put it down. It was one of them comic books that I was reading through it and I just absolutely gripped to the story. And more recently they're doing monthly issues of the Curse of the White Knight, which kind of follows on with this and follows the character of Jean-Paul and Azrael and why the Waynes are at war with. It goes into the deep history of Gotham, basically. The White Knight one, Joker goes straight, and that's what hooked me straight away. It was like, Joker finds a way to become normal. He runs for mayor and everybody is behind Jack Napier, and there's so many little things in that comic that are just like Easter eggs to Batman fans, little things that you'll see in the background that are just a good little nod or a little sentence here and there that's just like a reference to a film or something like that. I honestly believe it may be the best Batman story that I've ever read. It topples Dark Knight for me and Dark Knight Strikes Again, which everybody everybody talks about, which are also here in my collection. It's, you know, some of the more famous Batman graphic novels that have been created. One of my personal favourites, Long Halloween, amazing read. Again, quite a thick graphic novel, but it doesn't feel like it because you just can't put it down. Back, I believe in 2011, DC just redid everything. They did a story throughout 2009 and 10 called Crisis on Infinite Earths and Infinite Crisis. I believe it was 2009 and 10, where basically all the universes and all these different worlds met each other. After that, they decided to just redo everything, like start fresh. Every character has a new history, and it was called the New 52. I've got a few of these right here from, like, these are just called 52. And there's like volume 1 through 4, and it just gives you a look at some of the characters in the DC universe. But all of them had their own, from like Detective Comics started again, and Batman started. It was a really interesting time in comic books, and it's kind of around the time that I really started buying more of them and following the story. So for example, after Batman RIP, there was the Battle of the Cowl, where people was going to be the next Batman and stuff like that. Of course, it ended up being Dick Grayson, but then Bruce Wayne came back, and you know what, I could just talk about comic books so long. One of the things that we're actually talking with the idea here is doing a second show where I'll talk about some of these comic books in more depth and give you my top 10s, my recommendations, what I'm reading right now. Let us know if that's something that you'd be interested in the comment section below, and it'll be something that we'll try and bring to you on a more weekly basis. But yeah, I absolutely love comic books. They get a bad rap as being a nerdy thing, but I just say give them a go, because you probably don't know that you've been influenced by comic books at some point or another. You know, everybody knows about DC, everybody knows about Marvel, but then there's Boom, there's Vertigo, there's Dark Horse, there's all these different ones. There's ones where Batman fights Alien. It's insane. If you want to check out our previous episodes, they're right here, and make sure you give this video a thumbs up and you subscribe to the channel so you're alerted when our next video goes up.